very much for joining us on AI plus Human Intelligence is the Future of Work. I'm Jeanne Meister, partner at Future Workplace and Forbes contributor. And we're here to have really a good discussion with a really impressive panel on the impact of AI in the workplace. So you've probably been reading a lot of the same headlines that are in the workplace today, right? It started out in 2013 with Oxford saying 47% of all jobs will be eliminated in the US. Then actually McKinsey Global Institute had reached a different conclusion, and that was not so fast. We're not automating and eliminating jobs, but 30% of about 60% of all jobs have something in the job that's routine in nature. So the real issue that we're seeing here is not the automation per se, but how drastically work is being changed because of AI across all functions. And we're going to do a laser focus on what is happening in the world of HR and inside the workplace. What's the impact? So the title of the session is actually the same title of a Forbes blog I wrote. So if you want to go in deeper detail, feel free to do a search on Google. But I'm going to ask the panelists just to introduce themselves, their name, and their title and their company, and then we'll get right into what's really happening with AI inside the workplace. So Leighanne, would you like to start?
Well, thank you all for being here and beating the crowds. Leighanne Levensaler, and I'm from Workday, and I run our corporate strategy function as well as our new ventures fund, Workday Ventures. So, delighted to be here.
Thank you. Eyal.
Hey everyone, my name is Eyal Grayevsky. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Maya Systems, the creator of the AI recruiter Maya. And yeah, I'm excited to be here and talk a little bit about AI and how humans are collaborating.
Okay. Chris.
My name is Chris Bunio. I'm a senior director within Microsoft's education industry team. My day-to-day life is actually working on solutions for the education space, but we're seeing more and more that's bleeding into the workplace, and we're seeing skills development kind of span both of those. Happy to be here and looking forward to a great discussion.
Hi, I'm Mike Schroeder, CHRO with View Dynamic Glass, and excited to be a part of this panel and talk about how we're thinking about integrating AI and pieces of AI into the scaling of our company.
Okay, so we're going to talk about how AI is impacting the entire employee life cycle, from how companies are sourcing, screening, interviewing employees, to how they're developing their careers, performance management, and coaching. So I'd like to start with Eyal, and let's start with a question that I actually get asked all the time, and I'm wondering how you're going to answer this. Why are so many chatbots named after women?
Wow, really putting me on the spot. It's funny because I went through this process of naming our chatbot, and I really wanted to go against the grain and pick an ambiguous, name, or even a masculine name. And my branding advisors said, hey, listen, it's all about developing an experience that people are going to think is trustworthy and approachable. And so, ultimately we ended up with Maya, which we fell in love with because it stands for My Assistant. So it had, an underlying meaning. It also, in Hindi, I recently learned it means illusion.
Illusion.
Which is
okay.
Actually pretty ironic. But yeah, it's unfortunate that there's this gender piece.
Yeah.
But no offense to men, less trustworthy and approachable. And really it's a matter of developing an experience that everybody's going to want to engage with. And I think it's really semantics in the sense that ultimately you're picking a name that you're getting behind, and that's what's important.
Yeah, so. You're creating the experience, but if you go across them, Maya and Tala and Olivia, it becomes really clear that it is gender specific. But let's talk about recruiting, because recruiting and the whole talent acquisition function is ripe for automation. In fact, I think your company has gone on record as saying AI can automate actually 75% of the recruiting function. So share with us a little bit about, how you see AI impacting talent acquisition.
Yeah, well, today the recruiting process is highly manual and inefficient, largely because you're just dealing with so much work, right, in the process. And a few of the things that really stood out to us was that 85% of applications, when you apply to a job, you don't hear back often. And what it does is it drives you to apply to as many jobs as you can. We call it spray and pray, right? You're going to apply to, even there's features today where you can click apply and apply to 50 jobs. So the industry's really playing into that. And on the other side of the coin, recruiters really struggle to properly manage those relationships and that kind of top of funnel recruiting process when you're seeing so much volume come through, often unengaged, unqualified candidates in many cases. And they're spending a huge amount of their time, going through this repetitive work of sifting, sorting through resumes, trying to chase people down to get them on a phone call, or in areas where there's talent shortages, go out and source for candidates. And so that entire process is slowing recruiters down. And when you look at the data, it takes about 43 days to get a job from start to finish. So the process is really long, which impacts people's lives, right? That's ultimately a paycheck. So when we looked at that process, we really, when we said that, we're talking about that repetitive work. How can we automate some of those initial conversations, for example, so that 100% of applicants get a chance to express their value to the recruiter, everybody's getting a response, and help shortlist and prioritize some of that work so that now recruiters can focus on that value add activity and ultimately improve the efficiency of the process and get people into jobs more quickly, which is going to impact the business positively, but also the individual who's trying to get a job. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, especially in that kind of first bottleneck of the process to bring in automation.
Yeah, I think I was recently at a conference with about 50 heads of talent acquisition from Fortune 500 companies. And in addition to focusing AI on the recruiting and sourcing process, they believe that, as I do, that one of the other benefits is using AI for the disappointed, right? And so when you think about just Marriott, they get something like 3 million job applicants and hire about 94,000. They know a lot about the delta between that, and so how can AI really manage an ongoing relationship? So it really impacts the whole recruiting process from applying all the way through. You're now part of a community, having looked for a job on the career website. So Leighanne, do you want to share with us how you see, from your point of view, how AI is impacting your client base at Workday?
And I think maybe just continuing on the thread of the employee life cycle, I mean, we think one of the reasons people go to companies, join companies, is for career opportunities. In fact, Gallup had a study last year that said, the most important feature for selecting a company, selecting a job, is the opportunity this is for millennials, for people to grow and learn. And we know that if people are growing and learning inside of the organization, they have those opportunities, they're more productive, and we also know that you're going to retain them, right, twice as much. Right. And so there's a great opportunity to use machine learning to improve the experience people have of career development inside of an organization. And so if you think about all the information companies know about the mobility, how people move around, what jobs they take, and I don't know about you, but I've had a sort of a very zigzaggy, circuitous route to where I am today. I studied organizational development, but now I'm an accidental venture capitalist, right? And so how does that happen? But that's what we learn when we sit down and we have coffee with people, right? And we ask them, how did you get where you were? That's a natural part of career development. Well, machine learning has the opportunity to take millions and millions of data points and provide recommendations, not unlike Netflix does for you, to where do people go in the organization? Where do other people watch? Where do people go? How have they moved around? And then create experiences at an application layer, create experiences for individual to see the vitality of their organization, to actually follow people, and then to really dig in and say, well, that might be an interesting opportunity. Let me learn about that position, that job. Are there any vacancies at our organization? What are the skills needed? And then what are the learning experiences that can help me, kind of go on that journey as well? You can use machine learning and recommendations engine at many points on that career development kind of offering or experience. We think that's incredibly powerful because it absolutely has bottom line productivity impact and certainly helps with retention.
Okay, Chris, you're coming at this from a different angle. Where interesting, all of our panel are HR talent practitioners, and Chris from Microsoft is really focused on working in higher education and K through 12. So I'd like you to comment and discuss what can we, if we're in corporate learning and development in HR, what can we learn from the innovations that you see bubbling up in K through 12?
Yeah, it's a great intersection point. And one of the things that we're seeing in higher ed institutions all around the world is the need to be more deliberate and proactive on how to support students as they go through their journey. So students coming out of grade 12 will often have a majority of the skills that they need, and many times will not have those skills. So being able to start working with students as soon as they leave grade 12 and start getting them through the university system is becoming critical. Dropout rates, completion rates for degrees are actually not at the place that we'd want them to be in almost any part of the world. And some of the really key factors that come out there are very interesting because they have corporate analogs. So if students are not engaged, if students struggle with specific subjects, if students are not actually seeing their trajectory improve, they will tend to disengage more and they'll tend to trend towards a dropout. And if you think about the corporate world, when you get a new employee coming in, if they're not building the right skills, they're not getting engaged in the right way, they will have a similar sort of experience. So we're seeing a lot of analogs, and in the higher ed space, this is all starting to be driven by AI. So where you've got student data, you can tell a little bit about achievement, about performance, but more so, how are students actually engaging? You can start to chart their progress and be more proactive about how you intervene. And we see that connecting directly back to the corporate world. Very, very similar sort of trend.
Yeah. So Chris sent me an interesting set of white papers on the Microsoft point of view on skills needed for 2030 based on what you're seeing in the K through 12 world. And while STEM is certainly one of the skills, all of the rest of the skills that were in this white paper were uniquely human skills. Collaboration, critical thinking, I think computational thinking. You want to share that for all of us that are parents with students in the school system today?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a Microsoft sponsored piece of research, which is called the Class of 2030. And what it really focuses on is where, by the time we hit that 2030, so that's kids going into school now, where do they need to be? And what we found through that research is that there are going to be these trends on technology. You'll have specific technology for the time that's important. But as we look out, you've got to have the right human-based skills to be successful. We've got to have collaboration and creativity, which AI is going to be great at being able to take data and turn that into some kind of creative output. But it's not the same thing as actually being a human and being able to create the interactions and have that carry you through along with collaboration. So it was really refreshing for us to see, through that research, that humans are still at the center. AI and machine learning will augment, and in some places they'll replace a few things, but that's just opportunity for people to actually go out and build around that and actually enhance their own experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting. Right after he sent me that, I was looking at my Twitter feed, and something that was almost trending at the time was Elon Musk's response to a reporter who asked why was the production of the Model 3 halted, and he said, we actually use too much automation. I'm now convinced that humans are underrated.
It's a great line.
So that's another suggested reading. So Mike, as the Chief Human Resource Officer at a startup in Silicon Valley, you were looking at sort of the impact of AI and on transparency in the workplace. Do you want to share your point of view on that?
Sure, I think it's important to get ahead of some of these concerns and fear that, AI is great, but it's going to take my job and 3 of my friends' jobs out of the organization. And I think you need to start with, openness. There's actually, Europe is far ahead of the US in terms of mandating a process to take a look at data governance, take a look at what are the algorithms really doing and how are they going to affect people. But I think the most important thing to do is to be open with the organization and say, look, this isn't about removing a job per se, it's about making us more effective and creating more time for us to get into this space that Maya does, which is the relationship, and to avoid the negative aspects of not being there, which is the brand damage that not getting back to a candidate can do to your organization. So I don't think these things work in opposition of each other, but there's a lot of concern that you need to talk about up front in order to keep it from becoming this thing that you get a little bit of backlash with.
Mm-hmm. So Gartner shared an estimate that in 2022, 1 in 5 of all of us who are working will be working side by side with AI, a chatbot or some AI in the workplace. Are we prepared to do that? Are leaders prepared to do that? And what should we do as HR leaders to help them? Leighanne?
Well, I think it's really the same question we ask ourselves around just making data-informed decisions. I mean, really, AI is just accelerating that, making more available, making it more precise, more personalized. But really, it's about how do we use intelligence to augment our experiences, making them more efficient, making them better, more delightful, and getting into that analytical mindset that we all absolutely need, and how to use data, and then how to flex your empathy and some of those other attributes that we're going to need to really hone in on for the future workforce. So I think it's more a question about data savviness and the ability to use that for good versus a question of AI. That's just accelerating and creating richer experiences. So it's a data mindset.
Yeah, so Eyal, given that AI, you're focused squarely on the recruiting function, and if we believe that 75% of the whole process of recruiting can be automated, the obvious question is, if I'm a recruiting coordinator, what do I do?
Well, if you look at, you give me all the easy questions. So, when you type in Google, anybody feel free to give this a try, recruiters are, recruiting coordinators are, you're going to get a lot of negative stuff. And, it's really unfortunate, and it's not anyone's fault. The problem is that they're overwhelmed by a huge volume of work, and they're unable to deliver a great experience to everyone. And so when you actually talk to a recruiter, they really care about that issue. They take it personally, and people that are in the recruiting role, they're passionate about helping people get jobs. And so I think the important thing to note when we say 75%, we're talking about that repetitive work that's slowing people down, and often work that they don't want to do. They don't want to have to spend countless hours trying to pick up a phone and chase people down, or sift through basic data sets, or enter that into Workday. That's not fun. So I think the important thing is how do you take some of that work off of their plates to enable them to be much more effective at their jobs and educate them on why that's important. Because ultimately, once they find out that Maya is going to help them be more effective at communicating with all of their applicants, at prioritizing their workflow, at maybe managing some of these repetitive tasks so they can focus on more important things like relationship building on a person-to-person level, or nurturing a promising lead and getting more people across the finish line. A lot of them are incentivized by hiring output, so they love it. They're like, oh my God, now I can do 10 hires instead of 5.
Yeah.
So it's really not a matter of automating people out of jobs, it's more making them more effective and doing some of that higher quality work to generate better results.
I think our organizations have a commitment for upskilling, though, right? I mean, if we really want to focus more on have folks in recruiting or any other function that's going to be impacted by AI, how are organizations upskilling these key functions? Leighanne, any thoughts on how you would advise your clients?
Well, I think that, again, the more information that you have, the more efficiency you can build in the process, the more time that is freed up to do that. And organizations are, from a learning and development standpoint, they're really focused right now on the most impactful to the bottom line kind of work in that way. So what I would characterize as some of the back office functions aren't quite getting the upskilling attention that they need, and they're finding that they're having to do a lot of personal development to do that, sort of outside the context of the organization, kind of like the shoemaker's children.
Yeah.
And so I know, my organization, Workday, is deeply committed to helping to helping the professionals that use our technology to upskill in many ways. But I feel like we have so much to do as companies to train for the future workforce that we need to also kind of remember our back office functions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mike, you shared in preparation for the panel a really interesting article from a group you're involved with in Silicon Valley, the Marcella Center of Ethics. So do you want to share their point of view on data and privacy of key data that's being collected by AI?
The Marcella Center for Ethics is a really interesting partnership in Silicon Valley run by Kirk Hansen at Santa Clara University. And they have an individual now who's focused solely on privacy, AI, and emerging issues in this space. She wrote a really interesting article, and really the crux of this article tries to talk about what is worth preserving, what is uniquely human, and how do we protect that, and how do we keep AI from becoming intrusive and therefore something that organizations over time, including individuals, may rebel against. And it's a very thought-provoking piece. It went back to Steinbeck's age, to talk about the first reaction against mass automation and concerns of a mass automation mindset encroaching on politics and how we learn, how we live. I'd urge people to try and find that piece, because I think it's really helpful. Again, in a way, you look at this and go, well, we evolved through and past this in many ways, and I think by having this kind of a vibrant discussion of some of these concerns, is a really effective way to ensure that we don't fall into dark categories of misuse or neglect.
Yeah, so it asked, you can tell the article was so well written because it boiled it down to one question. And the question was, what are we willing to fight for, and what are we willing to fight against as AI really integrates our lives, our personal lives and our work lives, right? And so what are we willing, on this panel, I'd like your point of view, because it was such a good question. As leaders in organizations from Microsoft to Workday to the ones in between, what are we willing to fight for in the organization as AI is now just bubbling up, but if we fast forward 5 years, we're going to see real integration inside our work lives. Who wants to take a stab at that, Chris?
I'll take a run at that first. So it's a really interesting question, because I think the potential for AI is huge. The potential for either misuse or it being applied in a way that's not productive is also huge. I think one of the things that we see, and this is from a Microsoft kind of product standpoint, building AI into products is going to be the future. All the technology companies out there will be building some kind of AI into their products. The question is, how do you bring that in to make it useful to somebody using a product every day or using a service every day? How do you make sure that it's actually giving them value? And I'll talk from my own sort of experience with the tools that I use. But the things that for me today with AI are, can it suggest somebody I should connect with that's going to help me augment my skills? So looking at how do we build this human network? Can it tell me something about data that I don't know or is not obvious to me? And I've got a degree in physics, but I use it all the time. Do we have other ways of interacting that makes it easier for us to communicate as humans? So can you use translation services to actually be able to bridge language gaps or ability gaps? So there are a lot of different ways that AI comes in that we don't even think about as being AI. But that's foundational stuff that will change the way the workforce works. The other side of it, which is where AI is going to be a replacement for people, I think it's a bit of a stretch. We will always need to have people who are able to understand, create the right environment, and work with other people. But there are places, like the translation from data to knowledge. Chatbots can do a great piece of work, turning raw data into something that's more understandable. And I think it's okay that we start going down the roads to have that type of a function be more AI-driven. But security, privacy, those things need to be pretty center in that discussion so that we're not compromising ourselves as we go through it.
Yeah, and how transparent should our organizations be? So I'm thinking about a use of chatbot, not just for recruiting, but in coaching. That's now a very big use. And what I've been reading about and talking to our clients is that individuals that are engaged with a chatbot in this function are often more transparent in revealing issues around their own work lives than they would if they were talking to Leighanne here on a one-on-one conversation. So my question to the panel is, how transparent should organizations be about what they're doing with all this data? Because the chatbot is collecting it, because you're now, the good news is, you're engaged in a really, in a vibrant conversation, and you're revealing probably more than you would reveal if I were just face-to-face with Leighanne as my coach. So what do we think?
Well, I think we need to apply a growth mindset to the organization and have that be consistent with how we're using these tools.
Yeah.
So that what I want to mine out of this chatbot information is, where are people in certain types of roles struggling? What are they consistently looking for help in? What does that tell me about how effective our organization has been in communicating with individuals, and how can we improve? So I think it gives you this feedback loop that is potentially very powerful. If you think about it, many people at work get very little feedback, and it gets worse,
as you go up the ladder.
As you go up or down.
True.
And it's something that I've been working on for 20-something years, and I really see the advent of this technology as a potential, huge boost.
We can learn a lot from what people look for, search for, not quite at the coaching, the natural language processing to facilitate that kind of intimate coaching setup, but just keeping it real here, folks, right? Seriously. But what people search for in a knowledge base, what people search for, what are they trying to accomplish? The machine can learn, identify those patterns, and then create a better experience the next time, and in fact, a more personalized experience. So the next time I turn up and I'm searching, it actually suggests, it actually puts the relevance of the response is higher based on my past behaviors and patterns. And so I think in that way it's extraordinarily powerful. But we've been at this game, it feels like forever, but it's been 4 years at Workday since we've been working on building features that are data informed through machine learning and predictive analytics. And we've learned a lot along the way in partnership with our customers. And over the years, we've established what we called a principled leadership around the use of data to build product, to inform and influence product, how transparent we're going to be, the reliability, just the disclosure. And we're still learning, frankly. Everybody is still learning in this space. But with that said, last November, I had the opportunity to sit on a panel not unlike this for the Congressional Internet Caucus and talk about sort of some of these issues related to artificial intelligence in the enterprise, and just trying to help explain to the people that serve us in the government the difference between consumer experiences and enterprise experience, and the different bar we have in the enterprise that you have in the consumer world. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, which will take 4 hours of a panel, so we won't cover that today. But with that said, we also produced a policy paper where we recommended a code of conduct for enterprise that, and that was really based on our learnings, and, we presented it, with all due humility, but our learnings with our customer, what questions what do they want to see? Like, how is the algorithm created? What are you using it? Why are you using that data? What are the potential outcomes? What are the unintended consequences? All those questions. Again, we don't have the answer to all of them in every scenario, because this is just the way products are going to be built going forward. But what the deep commitment is to have some principles around this by which you do it, and a lot of transparency. And guys, we are early innings on all of this. All of us are. So I think it's important just to stay closely connected with customers and have a code of conduct for the industry.
No, I think that is really a big contribution, that we can all work with our communication leads in organizations to really put into place, that will have lasting impact. This connection, one of the observations I've been making is the companies that are really, let's say, farther along in developing AI solutions in the workplace, in non-tech areas, because we know that Microsoft and IBM and the tech companies are very far ahead on their journey. But what about the non-tech companies? It's my observation that those companies that have really applied AI in the customer experience are really much farther along. So sort of my other advice to all of those in the room and working in different organizations is to really partner and understand what your organization is doing in using AI to enhance the customer experience, and how is your chief customer experience officer creating new ways to use data to create a more compelling experience. I think that's what we can be farther along in our journey if we learn from our colleagues that we're probably sitting right next to, but haven't really started this conversation with. So I'm going to move it to, let's now assume you're working in a company and you're in a non-tech company, and you want to go on the journey to use AI to enhance your own employee experience, right? In any one of the different areas that an employee, in the moments that matter, right? What's our first couple of steps if we're charged with this initiative? Eyal?
First couple steps in terms of adopting the technology?
In terms of building a plan.
Building a plan.
Yeah,
I think
engaging stakeholders that
Yeah.
you want to go on this journey using AI to enhance the employee experience. How do we get momentum for this so that we're not the lone voice here?
Yeah, I think the first step is always identifying the business problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
Right. So, if you look at the recruiting process, where do I have bottlenecks, inefficiencies? Where is my candidate experience lagging? Post-hire, maybe I have turnover issues. How can I solve that? So you really need to start with the business problem and quantify the impact that business problem is having on your organization. And then start looking at use cases, right? So how are you going to apply the technology to ultimately solve that problem? And the goal will be to build a business case that you can ultimately pitch up the ladder. So if you can engage in a series of partners, do research, understand what are my options, maybe even engage a few pilots where you're able to test some of these solutions at a low cost and support some of those claims with actual data. And then once you have a clear path on things like how is it going to integrate, what's the process and workflow going to look like with this new technology. I think there's a lot of complexity there, but if you can really formulate that story, then you're going to get buy-in.
Yeah.
But that's no different than any other technology initiative.
Yeah.
The thing I would add that, when it's machine learning, because again, this is just a tool that we're using to design an experience, and there'll be the next thing and the next thing. This happens to be a huge one and a major set of difference. But with that said, there are a lot of, let's just say decide to improve something on careers or with skills or with learning or recruiting, whatever area you pick, what you're working on because you have a business problem, exactly how you outlined. Sometimes you're not going to have enough data to actually have a very high-functioning algorithm yet. And it's just going to take time. So you might want to pilot with a group and start amassing data so the algorithm gets smarter. Because if you're using machine learning for an assistant, and you're asking it, questions like, we always test Siri and Alexa with crazy questions like, why do we have 3 branches of government, or something like that. That's high-end processing, and it has to be taught that. So there's a lot of algorithms and a lot of experiences that you have to teach over time. So my only edit to a normal technology project or a normal solving a business problem would be that if you are using a data-informed aspect of the solution, that you have enough data and you can create a delightful experience because it knows you, it's personalized, it's understanding. So that would probably be the only edit to normalcy, right?
Yeah, and I think that this is where I think a lot of folks are struggling with, right? Where it's easy to define the problem because they can readily see the inefficiencies in some of these areas in the employee life cycle. And then they have to form their team, and often they're creating the data. It's the first time they're really stepping back and saying, okay, now what, I have to go deeper down now and create the data. Chris, do you want to share the Microsoft?
I think it's exactly the right path. Like, all this stuff has to be rooted in some kind of actual problem you're trying to solve. But the one thing I find with AI when we go and talk to corporate customers or universities is you have to be prepared a little bit to be surprised by what you can do.
Right.
We're stepping into a new space. Like, one of the things that I've seen implemented is students having facial recognition to tell you if they're frustrated with an assignment as they're doing the assignment. So literally a camera on a student's face where it can read their facial expression and say, is this person struggling? When you put that into an environment where somebody's got real issues understanding math or English, and it can in real time tell you this person needs help, that's pretty amazing. But it's not something you sort of think about today as a machine learning opportunity. But there are a lot of those out there. The comments on data are very, very appropriate, which is data sets need to be big enough to make these things smart. You can build data over time. You can find other ways to get data. But there's a lot that goes into it. Pilots are key. Understanding a problem, taking that problem, working with the right kind of partners, and trying to assess how would you define success is really, really an important part of that. Chatbots are one of those things that they're very easy to implement. You can stand up a chatbot in 15 minutes. I can show you backstage if you want to see.
Probably, Abdel doesn't think that.
Literally
15 minutes, right?
Yeah. But the value of that is only as good as the data that it's working off of and the set that it has, and it'll build that over time. But it is really, it's a traditional use case-based problem where we've got to find the right things. But I do, and I keep coming back to this with everyone I talk to, be willing to be surprised. Be willing to be a little bit more creative and open to what data can tell you once you start getting some of these algorithms in place. Because sometimes it can be quite surprising.
Okay, in terms of helping our employees develop their own skill sets, right? I mean, we talked a lot about how we need to develop more uniquely human skills, and many of the skills of the future from Microsoft's white paper and World Economic Forum really does focus on critical thinking and uniquely human skills. But what about the skills for how do I work with AI as my new assistant? So full disclosure, I've been testing out many different chatbots as a virtual assistant, right? And I'm surprised in how I've had to relearn. I've had to understand how to make the relationship between myself and my chatbot, who's a virtual assistant, be as seamless as possible, right? So one of the things I learned is that the chatbot I'm working with doesn't get nicknames. So if I'm having an appointment or a call with somebody and their name is, they have a nickname, then it's a problem for this individual, for this chatbot. So how do we, right, how do we help train the chatbot?
That's a great question. Some of the it happens with every new technology. You get an explosion. There are going to be 1,000 chatbots that you interact with every day soon.
Yeah.
And it's going to collapse down to the few that are actually good. We will see the same thing with AI. You'll find 1 million applications. Everybody's got an AI-enabled something today. You can go buy smart speakers and everything else. But as the industry matures and as our use cases mature, we'll actually narrow down into the best implementations that are out there. It's what happens with technology all the time. And what you will see over time is the best data sets are the foundation. But then where the biggest investments have gone into actually being able to understand the widest set of problems and apply it in an effective way. One of the most interesting scenarios that we see all the time is machine translation, right? So when you think about having people communicate all over the world, fundamentally something that is a human need, but facilitated by machines. And the best AI engines for doing text-to-speech and speech-to-text and translation in real time will be the ones that are going to rise to the top. And you'll see that across everything that's going to happen.
So big shakeout to come.
Big shakeout to come down the road.
That's what you're saying, right?
And we'll see AI get lower in the stack. Like, it will not be in your face. You won't see a chatbot and be interacting with a chatbot. You'll go and write an email, and something will suggest something to you.
Right,
It'll
right.
become a little bit more integrated at a lower level in what you do.
Yeah. So how are we preparing our leaders for this big change in how work gets done? Do you think our leaders understand the massive changes that are happening in the workplace? And how do we prepare them and our teams?
Well, I think there's folks that are early adopters of technology, that are forward thinkers, that are thinking about how to stay ahead, how to actually implement these sorts of technologies into their, whether it's their workforce and how their team is using technology, and those that are not. And so I think a big part of it is educating folks on how to ultimately take technology and use it to improve and to enhance their team and how they're able to operate.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many different ways and so many different applications of AI. So sometimes it's a bit confusing. There's a lot of noise as well, which I think doesn't necessarily help, because people are looking at technologies that are working less good. So when you talk about chatbots, there are so many different varieties and varying levels of sophistication. That chatbot that you're building in 15 minutes is probably a very basic experience.
I tell you, it's not going to answer a lot of questions for you very well.
It's interesting, like you were talking earlier about looking at our customer journeys that we create and using that. And, I think this is, you can't pick up any kind of periodical, any kind of media today without hearing about robots taking our jobs. I mean, it's just everywhere. But it was interesting. My mother-in-law, who's well into her 70s, she lives in Central California, she is not necessarily a technology savant, right? She's just not there. But she likes to go eat at Panera. Does anybody go eat at Panera? She loves to go. After church on Sunday, she goes to Panera.
Yeah.
And she orders ahead on her mobile device because they drive quite a ways. They're in the country, drive quite a ways to get there. She orders, she gets there, it's all efficient. She's so delighted. She comes up to visit Northern California, visit us. We go to the Panera in my little town. And nobody is there. So you can walk up and talk to a human. She goes to the kiosk, right? And she orders on the kiosk. And I said, Grammy, why are you going to the kiosk? She goes, it knows me. The kiosk knows me. And so I guess my point is this is so pervasive in our personal lives that I think it's about storytelling, it's about connecting people to experiencing they're having in their consumer worlds, how they bank, how they shop, how they get entertained, and saying, well, how can we take those same great experiences and efficiency and make the employee experience better, make the student experience better, make the faculty and staff experience better. And so we just have to do a much better job of bringing it down to something that everybody can get, that, okay, it's just technology, it's just another advancement.
Yeah.
Demystifying it is a big deal.
Yeah, the Panera thing.
I think one of the really interesting use cases I uncovered was with Marriott, and their head of human resources really created not just a new role and not just new training within the Marriott organization, but an absolutely new function where he combined the head of customer experience, the head of employee experience, and a cross-functional team of IT, marketing, and communications. And one of their first assignments was to do a Shark Tank experience inside the company and have folks propose, what are some use cases to use AI to enhance the employee experience that they were already experiencing with their guest experience. So I think we're going to see the boundaries and the lines between customer experience and employee experience really merge. And I think we're going to be training a lot more in the HR. I know that at Future Workplace, we're partnering with NovoEd, one of the MOOC providers, to create a whole new MOOC on how do we use AI in the workplace? What are some of the benefits, barriers, and journeys that we're going to go on? As we have about maybe 5-6 minutes left, I'd like us to get personal and think about how are we preparing our children for this new world of work. And if you have children in elementary school or high school or college, what advice are you giving them? Because the way they're going to work is probably going to be vastly different than how all of us have entered the workplace and have, developed our own respective careers. So, Mike,
Well,
do you want
I
to
have
start?
less anxiety on that topic than I used to. My daughter's a junior at Oregon. My son just graduated from Seattle University. And my advice for both of them is, eye contact is important. Learn it. Get off of your phone long enough to have a real relationship with another human being.
Yeah.
And learn how to solve problems, because you're going to have problems in your career. They're already way ahead of me in terms of technology and readiness, and what they can do with the laptop is just kind of blows me away. But I do see this need to continue to focus on helping prepare our kids for the conflict and the need to both collaborate and deal with issues in the workplace, because to the extent that they're drawn into these devices until emotion detection catches up, they are ill-prepared to deal with real issues in the workplace, and I find myself working on those kind of things all the time. Misreading email cues, misreading eye contact, body language. That stuff's important.
Okay, so humans are underrated.
Humans are very underrated.
To go back to a theme we talked about earlier. Okay, so Chris, how are you dealing with this in your personal life?
So it's interesting. My daughter is in a private French school, so she's learning another language, so she gets that benefit all the time. But it's a fully Microsoft-based school, so she's using all the tools. There is AI built into things like Office that help to inform students of different ways they can use information or content in projects. But where I really enjoy the school's experience is it's mostly project-based learning. So it is teams working together, teams of kids working together to solve a problem, to create a project. So even though they've got all this technology at their disposal and they use it very well, it's really the learning that comes from the projects that actually takes them forward. And it's something I love that the school does on a regular basis. And then more personally, my day-to-day job at Microsoft is making sure that the technology platforms out there have all got the support for every kind of learning model. So I'm happy to make sure that we're talking about social and emotional learning as we're talking about AI at the same time. And make sure that comes through as a kind of comprehensive view on what we need.
Yeah. Eyal, you're from your personal experience.
As the only one without kids.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not sure. I haven't given her Jeanne a chance to speak yet.
You can have my older one.
No, he can have my older daughter.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, but for my future kids.
For your future kids,
I mean,
right.
people on video games and constantly looking at their phone, and I think it's all about, making sure that they're playing sports and they're outside and they're building actual social skills. And there's also a lot of data on what types of jobs are in demand, and be able to kind of guide them in the right direction, I think is really important.
Yeah.
My older son goes to a micro school, and there's just 7 kids. He's twice exceptional, if you all know what that means. And he has they have this growth mindset kind of approach to school. And so he walks around, if he can't solve a problem or I'm complaining about something, he's like, Mom, you need to have a growth mindset. Constantly, just about everything.
And he hasn't even experienced Microsoft yet.
But it's fabulous. They are teaching them what we should all be learning, which is learning agility, the ability to learn, the love of learning, that idea that you can, take risk and you can mess up and you can be successful. And I just love that. I mean, sometimes I'm like, is he getting the basics? Like, I want to make sure he's getting the basics. But in truth, I can say the kind of skill set that I use in my job to flex in the multiple, different career kind of the things I've been involved in, are all the stuff that he's learning. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that experience, and that we have these unconventional ways of educating unconventional kids. So.
Yeah. So we want to leave you with the opportunity that AI brings to be more human. And that's, I think, where we want to be in our mindset. How can AI plus human intelligence really guide us through a really exciting and exhilarating journey that we're on in using these technologies for the good of our organizations and for the good of society. So thank you for joining us, and we're on to the next session. Thank you.